Ruby Dhalla is out. The Bank of Canada is scared. Trudeau's in Ukraine. NDP is ready to spend some money on the election. And are we about to double the funding for CBC? I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now, and with me, Ian Burns. We got that and a lot more to talk about on the really big show today. Ian, are you there?
I am indeed. How's it going?
There you go. Lots to talk about, right?
Indeed, as is the case every day now, and there's not even a Trump story there, so
No.
pretty good.
The Bank of Canada fears the biggest crash since 1992. We're going to play this clip for you from Tiff Macklin.
We don't get those economies of scale. Businesses can't grow their businesses by growing their exports to the United States. So they're going to invest less. There's going to be less production. Incomes will be lower in Canada. And unless we introduce a new structural shock, some structural reform that boosts our potential output, but boosts supply, there's no bounce back. So what that means, for monetary policy, we can't change that reality. The economy is going to a permanently lower path. So the only thing we can do is we can help smooth the painful economic adjustment to tariffs. But even there, monetary policy is constrained because we have to make sure that the tariff problem doesn't become an inflation problem. So what that means is you're not looking like a COVID type response. We're going to have to proceed quite carefully. We're going to have to balance yes, there will be downward pressures on inflation from the weakness in the economy, but there's going to be also upward pressures from higher import costs, a weaker Canadian dollar, inevitable supply chain disruptions. That'll all increase cost, and that'll put upward pressure on inflation. So we're not. I mean, what I was really trying to convey in my remarks today is we're not thinking of a COVID type response here.
So there you go. There's the comments from Tiff Macklin, fearing the biggest crash since 1992. He says U.S. tariffs would drive the Canadian economy into the worst recession in a generation. The recovery would take at least 2 years.
In the case of a trade war, there's no bounce
and,
back.
There's a story on Holly Dillon's Blacklocks as well, right? So this is a tough thing because we ship over 20% of our GDP to the United States, and they only ship about 1% our way. So it's not an even relationship. And why we're in this spot though is Justin Trudeau, the only prime minister in Canada, has presided over practically zero growth in productivity and zero growth in real GDP over his tenure as prime minister of Canada.
Yeah, and that's hardly news, is it? I mean, people have been pointing that out about the Trudeau government for many years now, that economically it hasn't been particularly successful or even mediocre. It's been bad. It's been a bad period for the economy. And I'm sure that he and the Liberal Party in general would blame COVID and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which disrupted energy markets. And now Donald Trump's pathological obsession with Canada and a desire to destroy America's friendships around the world. But I mean, it's still, as he said, as Macklin there sort of hinted at, he said, unless we have some kind of structural rearrangement, we're screwed, basically. And that structural rearrangement would be exporting to other countries, which we've had the opportunity to do over the Trudeau tenure, but we haven't done it because a decision was made that there was no business case for that.
Yeah, which brings us to the next story here, and this is a map that Liberal MP Francois Philippe Champagne actually shared on just on the last week there on Friday. And you can see in this map that energy is by far the single biggest contributor to Canada's GDP. And again, Alberta and Ontario are the powerhouses for Canada as well. And then what's happened with this, though, is why we're in this position where energy is our biggest, single most biggest contributor to our GDP. And here's some of the projects that were canceled over the past little while that would have given us different customers. The Northern Gateway Pipeline canceled in 2016, And that the Japanese just made a deal with the United States. That should have been our deal. Justin Trudeau said that there was no business case for shipping LNG. Yeah, and then Karina Gold at that time, she also said it's time to landlock Alberta's tar sands. And then there's the Energy East pipeline that was canceled. And then there's Teck Resources' big oil sands project that they already spent $1.5 billion on that, and they canceled that in 2020. And they blamed the Liberal government as well. And then on and on and on, and then the mining projects as well, and then forestry in BC. We're going to put this story on Kelowna Now later today, so you can read this full story. But that Canada's industrial footprint is a really good map to have a look at, and that was again promoted by Francois Philippe Champagne of Liberal MP. Any thoughts on that map, Ian?
Yeah, I mean it is very interesting to see how the Canadian bread is buttered, really, and it's all of the industries that seem to be quite unfashionable. Oh, actually, that's wrong. Were unfashionable for the last 9 or so years, but then have suddenly become fashionable again after Trump's intervention in the US-Canada relationship, let's call it that. But yeah, I mean, these are they're all kind of despised industries in many ways, aren't they? Like mining and energy, forestry. They've all had so much trouble, and they've all complained of a lack of support. And they've all said that, particularly this government, the Liberal government, hasn't really helped them very much. And I mean, that's particularly true when it comes to oil and gas, which is as you said, that is the ultimate cash cow for this country. And it's what we depend on for tax revenues, really, for wealth, for infrastructure, for education, healthcare, all the rest of it. And it hasn't had the best 10 years, really, has it? It hasn't been treated particularly well. So I think it is intriguing that Champagne would, or let's say Champagne's servant would put this on the internet, because it doesn't really reflect well on the Liberals, I don't think.
Yeah, so just the Energy East pipeline itself, capable of transporting about 1.1 million barrels per day, it would drive about $15 billion annually. And that project is only a $12 billion project, creating 14,000 jobs in development construction and about 2,300 jobs on an annual basis. And it would reduce our reliance on foreign oil, plus it would give us another market to work with.
And it would give us leverage over other countries.
Absolutely. And then if we look at the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Norway, which again has a very green kind of economy with 100% EVs on new sales, but over 300,000 per person in their Sovereign Wealth Fund, all from their oil and gas sector. Canada could be in that position.
But I mean, can you imagine if, just on a sort of personal level, can you imagine if your investment advisor called you up and said, "I've got this deal here. It's like $1,200 investment, and then you'll get $1,500 every year for however many years." If somebody came to you and offered you that, you'd be throwing your money in their face, wouldn't you? You would be desperate to get your money in their pocket so that they could go off and go ahead with this investment. But obviously, when it comes to a gigantic enterprise like the nation of Canada, you can apparently say no to things like that for various reasons that are very difficult to understand.
Yeah, the Teck Resources one would have been a $20 billion project and one of the largest oil sands developments in Canada, producing about 260,000 barrels of oil a day. Again, Canada would take some royalties from all of that.
But I mean, partly what this reveals, I think, I mean, obviously in politics, especially when you're in power, it's very important not to give the impression that you don't know what you're doing. You have to always look like you know what you're doing, and you're always like abreast of the realities in the world. But what this reveals from the Liberals and their new focus on energy and the way that they talk about the state of the world now, it reveals that they were very, very naive over the last 10 years, and they failed to predict, or they failed to anticipate, that Russia might be withdrawn from the world oil and gas market, they failed to realize that America might not always be a friend to Canada. And they failed to realize that sort of what Justin Trudeau always refers to as the rules-based order, the international rules-based order, that might start to fade away and countries might start to actually think about themselves more and turn more to nationalism. They completely failed to see that any of that was going to happen. And it's not like that came out of nowhere. None of those things came out of nowhere. They were all predicted by many, many people, including completely random anonymous accounts on Twitter and things like that. Like complete nobodies predicted that all of these things would happen, but the Liberal government didn't, and they got it completely wrong. And now we're in a situation where they said no to all of these projects, all of this infrastructure that would have made us a lot stronger now. And as a consequence, we look like a dying fish on the shore, don't we? Desperately struggling to try and turn back the clock.
Yeah, Tiff Macklin's comments would be a lot different if we had other ways to move our oil to markets. And you know, those are the decisions that were made by this Liberal government over the past 10 years that have basically like locked us into one main customer that is now basically having their way with us.
Yeah, but it's not like this is a meteor that's come out of nowhere. I mean, for many, many, many years, people have been saying it's a dangerous world, and we can't even count on America. Like we can't count on anybody. We have to count on ourselves. This has been spoken of now for a very long time, and the Liberals chose not to believe that. They chose a different path, which was based on the idea that we were going to that we were progressing towards like the Star Trek Federation or something, where everybody was going to be enlightened and friendly with each other, and that was just going to be it forever. So we might as well get rid of oil because we're gonna, it's gonna be wind turbines and all the rest of it, and everyone's gonna be our friend forever. I mean, it's kind of an extraordinarily naive worldview, I think, and it's now being exposed as that, but primarily by the liberals themselves, who now come out and say we've got to look after ourselves. We can't rely on anyone now. It's kind of like, yeah, we were trying to tell you that. Many people were trying to tell you that for many years, but you ignored them.
Yeah, there is people in the United States that are kind of like trying to campaign for Canada, including Ben Shapiro. He's a very well-known figure in the United States, saying he doesn't understand why the Trump administration, I mean, he's a friend of Donald Trump, is going after Canada. He gets China and Mexico and that, but he just doesn't understand why Canada. And like I said, CEO Jim Farley of Ford is also trying to work with the administration down there and convince them that tariffs is not the answer for Canada. So there are a lot of people in the United States, especially in the border states, that are trying to alleviate these tariff fears. So, understand that not all Americans are the enemy of Canada.
Yeah, but the ones that matter seem to be, which is the unfortunate reality, isn't it?
Justin Trudeau, he's in Kiev right now. And the 3-year anniversary of the start of that Ukraine war. We actually have 2 people coming in for interviews later today. We have Dennis, which I've interviewed in the past from the Friends of Kiev. He'll be coming in and talking about the 3-year anniversary. And then you arranged an interview as well.
Yeah, that's the Okanagan for Ukraine group, which they're very focused on the Ukraine issue. They're very knowledgeable, very interesting. So that's going to be a Ukrainian woman, so a Ukrainian refugee, a young woman, and one of the leaders. I'm not sure how they actually arranged the leadership of that organization, but one of the leaders of Okanagan for Ukraine as well. So that should be very interesting.
Yeah, Trudeau and Kiev pledging more military equipment today, and also pledging to give them $5 billion of frozen Russian funds. And all this going on well, there's, for the first time in 3 years, we're hearing of peace talks. I guess, well, not the first time, because there was a deal almost done a long time ago that was nixed by the Biden administration and the UK. But sounds like it's a lot closer right now. A lot of talk about peace right now.
Well, it does seem sort of close in one sense, but then really far away in another sense, because the two main backers of Ukraine, like the European countries plus Canada, on the one hand, and then the US. They're completely at odds with one another, and there's clearly open division. The Ukrainians have nothing but contempt pretty much for the Americans, and that's also true of the EU plus Canada, or the European countries plus Canada. They're openly contemptuous of the Americans right now and speaking of them in a very bad way. So it is strange because it might turn out that Trump and Putin do a deal, but then Ukraine and Europe plus Canada don't say yes to it. So then it'll just be a waste of time pretty much.
Well, we shall see, I guess. Like I said, Trudeau on the last of his world tour as well. He's got how many days left now? 6 + 9. So what? Like less than 2 weeks almost, right? A little more than 2 weeks of Trudeau's farewell tour.
I'm sure he's got a good one up his sleeve for the finale. He does like to put on a show, doesn't he? So
How much
I'm not
money
sure what
can
it'll be though. I
How
can't
much
think, but it'll be something good.
how much money can he spend in pledge in the next 16 days?
Yeah, I mean, he's done a lot of his favorites, hasn't he? He did the Haida Gwaii thing, so he's done First Nations. He's always presented himself as a great friend to the First Nations, though, I mean, a lot of people have disputed how much good he's actually done in that department. Ukraine, that's another one of his obsessions. He's very interested in Ukraine, isn't he? So what's next? I mean, he's always presented himself as like a massive friend to the LGBT, I was going to say community, but that's a pretty stupid way to phrase it, isn't it? People of an LGBT persuasion. So I guess maybe he'll do something in that area. And then what remains? I don't know. Something in Quebec, maybe? Some massive bonanza for the Quebecois.
He did announce a massive bonanza with that rail line that he announced that you just wonder why there is even a parliament if he can basically commit Canada to the largest infrastructure project ever without a sitting parliament. And then, like the other day, Pascal St-Onge came out and said they want to double the funding for the CBC. And again, without parliament and any oversight at all, just so I guess in their minds, there is no need for parliament. You just make all these declarations.
Well, they definitely seem to think there's no need for parliament because they prorogued it, didn't they?
Right. So there you go. And speaking of the Liberal leadership race, another one bites the dust as they booted out Ruby Dhalla, citing 10 infractions in her leadership campaign.
Can you imagine if it was the Conservatives that had done this, got rid of, let's imagine the Conservative leadership, or the NDP, or whatever you want to say, if they had two candidates of Indian origin and in a competition and expelled both of them. I have a feeling that we'd be reading quite a lot of CBC articles about anti-Indian racism within the Conservative Party.
Speaking of the CBC, though, Ruby Dhalla learned of her disqualification while during an interview with CBC. They basically read her disqualification to her while she was on the air, and basically, just asked her what she thought about it. Like, they didn't even have the courtesy to tell her first. They leaked it to CBC, and then they read the disqualification to her on the air.
Yeah, that's a little bit humiliating, isn't it? A little bit, almost seems a bit cruel.
We have a clip here from Ruby Dhalla that we're going to play.
Have you received official word yet from the Liberal Party on your disqualification from this race?
I haven't as of yet. It's quite interesting that I turned on CBC News and read your headline that I was being disqualified from the race. I checked my email, my campaign team has, and as of this moment, we have not received any indication from the Liberal Party as to that type of decision, which to me is very alarming and very shocking that there are these types of leaks, from sources that are occurring.
We have just received a statement from the Liberal Party, Ms. Dhalla. I swear this just came into my email. It's a statement by Azam Ismail, who is the Liberal Party of Canada National Director, on Ruby Dhalla's candidacy for leader of the Liberal Party. Today, the Liberal Leadership Vote Committee unanimously made the decision to disqualify Ruby Dhalla. The decision followed an extensive process and review, including interviews, questionnaires, and an opportunity for Dr. Dhalla to directly address the committees. After a thorough investigation, the Leadership Vote Committee and the Leadership Expense Committee, sitting jointly, unanimously determined that Dr. Dhalla was in breach of 10 violations of the National Liberal Leadership Rules, Leadership Vote Rules, and the Leadership Expense Rules. The violations include concerns about alleged violations of the Canada Elections Act, certain other election finance matters, non-disclosure of material facts, and inaccurate financial reporting. The Leadership Vote Committee determined that the violations were extremely serious and accepted the recommendation of the Chief Electoral Officer and disqualified Dr. Dhalla under Section 8 of the National Leadership Rules. I'm assuming this is the first you are hearing this statement. What do you say that it was unanimous that there were 10 violations of those various rules?
Well, I think it speaks to the state of the Liberal Party of Canada that a candidate who is running to become leader of the party, who is running to become prime minister in our country, is finding out that she has been disqualified on air from an email that the media outlet that she is interviewing with has received. So it is very alarming and very shocking. It is certainly not surprising, because I think the Liberal Party of Canada was seeing exactly what our internal polls are telling us, that my campaign and my team, we were neck to neck with a front runner in the race. They did not want me to go on to that debate stage in Montreal. They certainly did not want me on that ballot. And the Liberal Party of Canada wanted to complete the coronation of Mark Carney. All of the allegations that you have mentioned have been, that you have spoken about, they are completely false. They are fabricated, and I will not allow the Liberal Party of Canada, or anyone for that matter, to smear my name or to smear the name of thousands of volunteers in our campaign.
Well, we were saying that Ruby Dhalla wasn't getting any airtime with CBC. There you go. She just got some airtime with CBC.
Well, they saved the best for last, didn't they? But yeah, it's like this is a trend that we've seen. This doesn't only happen in Canada. I mean, this famously or infamously, this happens in the US as well, with various methods employed to get rid of the likes of Bernie Sanders. You know, the candidates who are not approved by the party, they just want to get rid of them, don't they? So that they can get the people that they want, and they want to get them there as safely and comfortably as possible. And here it is. Here's another example. We do see it quite a lot. This is a pretty frequent occurrence. Something of this variety occurred in British Columbia as well, didn't it? When there was a challenger to David Eby. She was kind of quite quickly gotten rid of. I mean, it does happen, and obviously there are times where they'll be completely there will be obvious violations of the rules in place, and people will be removed. But I mean, I feel like that should be among the most rare events in the whole of the democratic system. It should be a pretty extraordinary event that we all remember and remark on. But it isn't, is it? It happens all too often, and I feel like that's going to give the impression to the Canadian people that our political parties, aren't really all that democratic after all.
Yeah, it's actually a little strange too, because it wasn't just a couple days prior to that they were trying to not include her in the French debate because they were refusing her a translator, and then she kind of worked through that, and then they waited till her final check was in, so she's provided the $350,000, and then just before the debate on Friday, I guess was that they let her know that she's not going to be able to run, and also let her know on air, which I found to be really strange. Like we said, she wasn't getting a lot of airtime with CBC, and they finally give her some airtime to let her know that she's done.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it does seem almost to be cruel. I mean, it might well be the case that they'd already sent that email to her, the Liberal Party, and she just hadn't opened it yet. But it still doesn't change the fact that she learned about it on air. Yeah, it doesn't.
Well, I mean, if
it
this
doesn't look good.
I think, just like getting fired, it's always nice to get fired, first by your boss, as opposed to finding out from your coworkers. You know what
Indeed,
I mean? Like,
yeah.
you can make contact with her. I'm sure there's ways to get a hold of her before you leak it out to the public, right? Basically, she was fired by the Liberal Party, and they did a public firing.
Yep, and obviously similar occurred with Chandra Arya, who was very, very rapidly dispatched, wasn't he? He was gotten rid of a lot quicker than Ruby. But yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't actually I haven't checked out all the news on this, so I do wonder now if she's going to be refunded. Has that part of the statement? Because
I
we didn't
mean,
get that statement from the Liberal Party.
according to the Liberal rules, there is no refunds. Like that money goes into the Liberal coffers, win, lose, or fired.
Well, I sense that this will be hashed out in the courts over a number of years, no doubt.
But she has appealed, so we'll see what her appeal does and how long it takes for an appeal. Maybe they'll hear her appeal after March 9th.
Yeah, and give her all her money back.
Yeah, and then it is that time. There's a Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney and all of them are pushing this out there. You now need to verify your ability to vote, and I think it's through a verification process, including Canada Post. There's Canada Post showing that it can still do something for Canadians, verifying your ability to vote in this Liberal leadership election. Basically, this is almost like an internet poll for picking the next Prime Minister of Canada, because that person on March 9th will become the next Prime Minister of Canada.
Yeah, and it's a surreal situation with Parliament prorogued as well, and almost like democracy is temporarily suspended. It's a very strange thing to do. But I mean, obviously that it's completely legit and constitutionally in terms of the Westminster system. This does happen and has happened in the past, but I mean, it just doesn't really it doesn't look right to a lot of people, and I think not a lot of people actually understand the every detail of the Westminster system, do they? And when this happens, it does look odd, I think, and a lot of people maybe wonder about the nature of Canadian democracy.
The Liberal leadership debate, the first one, you can go to the next one actually, Rommel, goes tonight, the first one. And then the second one, I think the French debate goes on the 25th. And that'll be at 8 to 10 Eastern time. And guess where? It's going to be on Facebook as well. We can't put stuff on Facebook, but the Liberal Party has figured out a way to put stuff on Facebook. They've broken their ban with Facebook for themselves, but not for Canadian media outlets.
Yeah, they're really good friends and allies of the independent media sector in Canada, aren't they, the Liberals? And that is indeed how they advertise themselves, as great friends to independent media. So there you have it.
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about that real quick, another 3 outlets announced on Friday closure, and there's 3 outlets from Glacier Media, and they're all Lower Mainland publications that have called it a day. And that, I think that total is now close to 70 or more publications across Canada that have called it a day since Bill C-18.
I mean, it's absolutely tragic. It's almost like a clean sweep, isn't it? Of all, it's almost like as well as like last in, first out, like the newer brands. But these ones like Burnaby Now and all that, they've actually been around for a long time.
Yeah, they're
So
Glacier
it's
Media.
Interesting.
They're Glacier
Yeah,
Media
that's
outlets.
Glacier, Glacier is propped up by our tax money.
Yeah.
Canadian
still can't make it.
taxpayers prop up Glacier Media. You fund that, whether you like that organization or not. And yeah, they can't even stay alive with the largesse of the federal government. So I mean,
And just a note,
a very bad sign for the media.
And just a note, we get 0 funding from the federal government, or the provincial government for that matter. And we're still here, and yet, the ones that are getting funding are dropping like flies. And again, you can go look at the stock chart of Chorus, which is global. Does not look good. Go look at Post Media and go look at Glacier Media, and you're going to see the same problems over and over and over again. And it's this Bill C-18 is a big contributing factor in this. And the sad thing is that a lot of these legacy newspapers asked the Trudeau government for this, and then it's just been, and we've done so many articles on it. You can find them on Cloner now. And I think it was Michael Geist that said that the Liberal government just doesn't know how to say it was wrong.
Yeah, that they're too stubborn. That they've backed themselves into a corner here, and they just didn't want to. They didn't want to surrender. They just wanted to keep pushing it. But they have surrendered, though, I would say, in that they've lifted the boycott on Meta. They told us that Meta was endangering democracy. That's how extreme they went. So they suggested that Meta had put Canada put Canadian democracy at risk of being destroyed and presumably therefore replaced by some kind of tyranny. I mean, an extraordinary accusation to make. Really quite, extreme thing to say. Possibly one of the worst things that you could say about a corporation. And then now that's all forgotten and they're given the money again. Now they're funding Meta, this organization that they previously told us is putting Canadian democracy at risk. So I guess the federal government now is happy to fund organizations that endanger Canadian democracy, which is a little bit of a turnaround, isn't it?
We do have another comment here. We didn't put it in order, I guess, but here's Ruby Dhalla's response later on from this, and we're going to play this clip here.
Let's do this. Thank you. 3 minutes before I'm supposed to be joining this call, I've just received this message from one of the most prominent reporters in our country. They are going to disqualify you for campaign irregularities and not for foreign influence. The past 48 hours have been very difficult. Please do not disqualify me. It will not send the right message for our party to immigrants and for young people and women in our country. I know that my brother's with me because it's June 33. His angel number is 33. 333, yeah. They had a meeting with me at 1:30, and I said, regardless of what you think of me, just think about the other cultural communities in our country and women and young people. You're going to send the wrong message.
They only want to talk about diversity. They only want to talk about representation of women. But when it comes down to it, they want to silence you and they want to disqualify you. They did not want me to go on to that debate stage in Montreal. They certainly did not want me on that ballot. And the Liberal Party of Canada wanted to complete the coronation of Mark Carney.
There you go. Ruby Dhalla has her say. She's done a few interviews after that, and we're going to reach out and see if we can get one with her as well. The NDP launching election ads. Jagmeet Singh has got a $500,000 video campaign, and I'm sure some of that's going to get spent on Meta. Again,
absolutely, 100%.
He also supported this Meta ban and also supported Bill C-18 that stopped media outlets from putting their content on Facebook, and it's endangered our communities in times like wildfires and that. And here they go. They're going to be spending money on Meta at the same time while we're blocked from putting news on there. And it's been shown in studies that Canadians are reading a lot less news now. And the communities are a lot less safer because there is no access. And again, for us, it's a symbiotic relationship. We never wanted money from Facebook or Meta. We want the audience we earned. We had over 200,000 on Facebook and Instagram that we earned over 10 years serving our community. And it's been taken away from us by these same people now that are going to spend money with them that said that Meta was the foe.
Well, Jagmeet Singh is absolutely, as you can see there, wearing his boxing gloves. He's there to fight for you, the little guy, against the CEOs. That's his entire shtick, isn't it? That's his platform. So a really good way to fight against the CEOs is to go and spend loads of money with American trillion-dollar companies. So let's see if he does indeed do that, because that would certainly be congruent with his policies, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he's always saying he's fighting for the little guy. But I mean, again, if you watch the actions, they don't match the words.
True of all politicians, I would say. Unfortunately, we're represented by pygmies these days, aren't we?
And then we have our friend, the Heritage Minister, Pascal Saint-Onge, wanting to double CBC funding because she says it's a matter of national security.
Yeah, it's an interesting timing just before an election to promise to double the income of one media platform in the country. It's a very interesting approach to democracy. Once again, that our favorite word.
raises for everybody at the CBC, and the rest of the media outlets can gasp for air as they got their knee in your throat with Bill C-18.
But at least it's a nice bit of carrot for, well, it's carrot and stick, isn't it? For the CBC, the Liberals are giving them very big fat carrot to run towards, and then the Conservatives have got that stick, slapping them on their hind quarters, promising to defund the CBC. I wonder what the CBC's world famous commitment to neutrality will look like during this election when they've got a choice between two parties, one that wants to basically, remove their income, the pension, and all the rest of it, all the workers, and the other one that wants to give them lots more money. Who do you
Well,
think the CBC is going to be inclined to support? We'll have to sit on the sidelines and watch with interest.
well, I would just say to people, just go and take a look at the coverage over the Liberal leadership race and Pierre Poilievre's comments and see how fair the coverage was with the 6 candidates and 5 candidates over the past little while. And then, even Pierre's speech that's done really well on the internet, they show very little of that. And yet, Mark Carney seems to get a lot of airtime.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is, to be fair, that's true on the private media outlets as well, isn't it? But I mean, you could also say that they're all kind of in a fairly similar situation as well. They're all reliant on handouts from the government, from the Liberal Party, we should say.
If they would even give us one 1/100th of the CBC budget, think what we could do.
Yeah, just think about it. No, I'm not gonna take a cheap shot at CBC there. I'm just gonna rein that in before I say it.
You're going to rein that in? There you go.
Yeah, we love our friends at the CBC, don't we? And hard-hitting journalism.
And then the National Post put out an article saying, should we get a Doge effort here in Canada, and who would lead it? They've got Elon Musk in the United States leading the Doge effort. Who would lead the Doge effort here in Canada?
Who would it be? Probably. I'm actually struggling to think who it would be. Ryan Reynolds, probably.
I've got a name that is quite controversial figure. He ran for prime minister at one point, and he seems to have he's a charismatic character that you love or hate, similar to Elon Musk, and it's Kevin O'Leary.
Yeah. Well, I guess he's pretty close to the whole Trump crew as well, isn't he? So he would know what they're up to.
He knows business. He knows business well, and he'd be a great Doge figure for Canada. And he doesn't back down. He's a character that a lot of people love or hate, but he is a controversial figure, I guess, for a lot of people. But he would definitely probably do a good job as the Doge Meister here in Canada.
Yeah, well, I don't see the Liberal Party giving him that job. But if the Conservatives won a majority, I don't know if they would give it to him either. I don't think they're particularly friendly with each other, are they?
The Liberals and the NDP have blocked how many reviews of documents for spending? We don't have enough time in this show to go through all the blocked access to documents on spending.
Yeah, well, it actually brought Parliament to a standstill, didn't it? That was the primary justification for the prorogation of Parliament given by Justin Trudeau, wasn't it? That
the 200
Parliament had basically been gridlocked.
The $200+ million that they wouldn't reveal where it went, and allegations that Stephen Jabot's companies were on the receiving end of it.
Something along those lines, yeah. Nothing that we should be interested in. Those mere peasants.
Anyway, Kevin O'Leary for Dogemeister for Canada. Somebody should put that out there and get that tweet going. He's always looking for something to do.
Hey, he's a busy boy, isn't he? I saw him doing an interview on Fox. I think it was Fox, and he's got his own little home studio, hasn't he? All ready to do all these interviews. He's got it sorted out.
He's got a fashion look as well. He does the suit on top and some like Al Bundy fuzzy pants on the bottom. Like Look, he looks like he's wearing PJs on the bottom, and he's all suited up on top there.
Why not, eh?
And then this is an interesting one. An MP, Charlie Angus from the NDP, is explaining why he's sponsoring a petition to revoke Elon Musk's Canadian citizenship. So my question to you is this: if this works, if you can actually sign a petition to take away somebody's citizenship, I'm sure there'd be a lot of petitions out there to get rid of a lot of MPs that, including Justin Trudeau. I'm sure that you could probably garner way more signatures than Elon Musk could garner.
Yeah, I imagine that's right. Yeah, I mean there are also dozens of MPs that have at least 2 passports, because obviously a lot of this is based on he's a dual national. Oh, well, he's actually a tri-national, I think. So I think he's also got South African. So he's got three different citizenships, Elon Musk. But that's a lot of this argument is based on this isn't his main citizenship, because obviously there's a bit of a that it's considered to be rather extreme to remove citizenship from somebody that only has one nationality. And as far as I'm aware, Justin Trudeau, for example, only has the one. So
you're
it'd be a bit hard to get rid of it.
Are you talking about Mark Carney now, who has 3 and hasn't lived in Canada for the past 10 years, really?
Yeah, so there you go. That might be one that you could do. Then he could go back to his beloved homeland of Ireland.
If I was these MPs, I'd be careful what you wish for here in being able to revoke citizenships based on petitions.
But he also, I mean, the rationale given in this petition, it sounds actually quite sort of plausible when you read it. It's like he's serving a foreign government that is attacking Canadian sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
That is actually true, I would say. And then it's saying that he's also working against Canadian interests. In a sense, that's true as well. But it's like, it's about how you interpret that, isn't it? Because it's theoretically possible that at some point in the future that it might be reversed. And, let's say like a left-wing person with Canadian citizenship is trying to work against a right-wing government, then in that scenario, would they also be up for losing their citizenship? I feel like the likes of Charlie Angus wouldn't be so keen on that. So you have to bear in mind that if you can do it to your opponents, then your opponents can do it to you. And often in politics, I feel like that question isn't even considered, or that possibility isn't even considered.
And then moving on to some more international kind of news, and this is one that's been talked about for years and years and years, and supposedly the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has that list on her desk, and that includes the Epstein list and the JFK files and the MLK files, and supposedly they're one step closer to being released to the public. It'll be interesting to see, and there's a lot of speculation that there's Canadians named on that Epstein list as well, so it'll be interesting to see who's on this list.
I'm just like, I'll believe it when I see it. This sort of thing has been promised for so long. And this is such an obvious, like, red meat to the base kind of thing to do, isn't it? Or to say, rather.
Yeah.
So I would be really, really surprised
I mean, for
if
me,
they lifted the lid on the whole Epstein thing, especially considering that there's pretty strong, at least like circumstantial evidence to suggest that this was an espionage operation, at least to some extent.
Yeah.
I mean, the American government of any Republican, Democrat, Trump, or whoever, don't tend to reveal intel ops carried out by themselves or their allies. And if that is indeed the case with Epstein, there is no way that they're going to reveal the details. They just won't do it.
Well, I mean, in the old saying I used to know, pitter patter, let's get at her. And like open the files, Pam, and let's have a look. Let's see who made these promises. I mean, they have delivered on their promises, so let's see it. Let's see it. The unredacted version. I remember lots of times when Trudeau released some documents, and they would get like 20 pages, and there'd be like one word left on the page, like the thes and the ands are there, and everything else is blacked out. We don't want that. We want the whole thing, the unvarnished truth.
Well, it's national security, isn't it? That's always the excuse, and
Yeah.
that's when you get those ludicrous documents where it's like I've seen the American documents where they are literally 100% redacted. Like every single word. It's just total. There's no
Yeah,
point.
it's just a
Completely pointless.
black page, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, they even go to the extent, don't they, of like they do the little. It's almost like they got black tape over each sentence. It's like, why did you even release this? The whole thing is stupid. But like when it comes to national security, that's what the Americans do, or most countries do that, really, don't they? So, you know, if there's any kind of national security involved in this, then I would expect it'll be the same thing.
Well,
And that definitely applies even to Trump. Trump likes to talk the talk, but he
that's-
doesn't reveal military secrets, does he?
well, this is where the rubber hits the road. Another good saying, and we'll see. I mean, they made big promises, so let's see it.
Yeah.
Let's see it. And I know I'm not on the list. How about you?
Are you certain?
No fancy flights for me. And then King Charles, you have a connection right there to the throne room, don't you? What's going on? They're saying, why isn't King Charles having anything to say about Donald Trump's threat to take over Canada, as we are still part of the British Empire, are we not?
Well, they don't like to use that term anymore, do they? They call it the Commonwealth these days. But
You
it's
got that
kind of
slide
this
there, Ron?
ludicrous system. It's this ludicrous system where you have like a completely ceremonial head of state. Obviously, that's also true in Britain, where he's entirely ceremonial. But I mean, Canada has an extra layer where you have the Governor General as well. The Governor General is a ceremonial figure who represents a ceremonial figure. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this article is just it's a bit silly, really. I think the CBC does the classic thing that they do, where they interview people that are considered to be experts, consider themselves to be experts, who then proceed to say the absolute obvious, which is that it's a constitutional monarchy with a representative head of state. Therefore, obviously, he's not going to say anything. But I think like when it comes to the monarchy, the more interesting thing to consider is that their powers are still like part of the constitution. They're still on the books. If only there came along a king or a queen at some point that actually tried to use them,
Yeah.
that's when it would get interesting. Because theoretically, King Charles could rule in a pretty sort of tyrannical way if he actually wanted to. He could theoretically just suspend Parliament and go back to direct rule, just see what happens. I mean, it's theoretically possible, but I don't think he has the desire to do that. Maybe that'll be King
He's
William when he comes to the throne. He'll come and rule again.
he's actually kept a pretty low profile out there in the media world, right? King Charles is not really like the Queen had a lot more, I guess, media attention than King Charles is getting.
I think the harsh reality is that Elizabeth was a very respected figure, and especially towards the end of her life, she was like a living representation of history. She was a historical figure that was still alive. So I feel like she just had a lot more respect and a lot more people admired her. Whereas with Charlie Boy, he's just been the butt of jokes really his entire life. He's just been mocked his whole life, and I think that's kind of carried through now that he's king.
Yeah,
Nobody's really that bothered.
his former wife, Princess Diana, was definitely more, I guess, well loved and celebrated than Charles, Prince Charles was at that time.
Totally, and that's still true. People still carry her memory around and still sort of look to her as almost some kind of a deity. That's that's in England, but I mean that's also true elsewhere. In the US, for example. I mean, there have been times I've been in the US and people have like asked me questions about Princess Diana. It's like, bloody hell, you still care about that? Like, but she had a massive effect on the
Yeah,
whole world, I think.
and then I would say like in some of the Canadian historical figures, Princess Diana would be one up there as one of the more popular ones in Canada even. And I would say the one that the people seem to be loving to hate right now is Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky has done more for Canada than most people have done, and been the source of pride and joy for Canada, and won many accolades for Canada. Yet lately, there's again some people that are trying to do these petitions, like this one for Elon Musk, this petition to remove his name from Wayne Gretzky Drive in Edmonton, the City of Champions, or the formerly known City of Champions. And I grew up in that area and got to watch a lot of Wayne Gretzky's greatness when he was on ice in the Oilers' heydays in the dynasty.
Yeah, well, it's we've seen this throughout history. It is actually relatively easy. It's pretty straightforward to go from being a hero to being a villain, you know. It's been happening it's been happening for thousands and thousands of years, and that's what seems to be happening to the Great One now, to
Yeah,
some extent anyway.
from
And Elon
hero.
Musk is another example. He was regarded as a complete hero, as
Yeah,
like a
again,
universally adored hero, and now
and
now he's seen as an enemy.
Elon Musk has done more for humanity than most people like combined, and with what he's done with the companies he has and some of the most important companies. And he has never had a direct attack on Canada. He happens to work for the guy that has made attacks on Canada, and yet he seems to be the target of people's displeasure, which is like completely unhinged. Moving on though, here's a shocker. Canadian Pediatric Society calling for better regulation and safety measures for protecting kids in off-road vehicles. I mean, these things go really fast, and a lot of people have their kids driving them, and of course, judgment at a younger age, and I would lump myself in there. I remember driving these things when I was not a side by side, but like the trikes were the rage when I was younger. And they were some of the most dangerous things ever. They're always flipping and doing these things. And a lot of people hurt on those things back then, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think they don't specify it, but I think it's probably important to specify that it's boys, isn't it, really?
Right.
Boys have this mad sort of death wish, I think, when they're younger. And I would include like golf buggies in that. I mean, I can remember driving around in golf buggies as a young chap, and nearly been in it over the side just because of, I think just when you're a sort of teenage boy, you just have this like impulse to do very, very stupid things, don't you? So,
I
and
think
these are
that,
really dangerous. I mean, just ask Ozzy Osbourne. He was nearly crippled, wasn't he, in one of these?
yeah, the need for speed seems to be a lot stronger than the urge to survive a lot of times. So,
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, boys, they need a way to do that, don't they? I don't think you can defy human nature and prevent them from kind of just being normal boys.
well,
But
maybe that's where the metaverse might come in handy. You can still act like an idiot in the metaverse, and then even lose 4 or 5 lives and not be losing your actual life. Maybe that's where they need to get their need for speed.
yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Or just sport, sport is the best way to channel it. Go and punch someone on the hockey rink or something like that. Go try and win a basketball game. That should give you the same kind of buzz.
Yeah, there's a comment on there and saying that the kids even on them, it's dangerous, and it is. Like these things go really fast, and you're in rough terrain, and a lot of times. I mean, I was up at Bear Creek once, and I watched a young man wheeling his dirt bike, and then snap his leg just below his knee, just above the riding boot, because like a motocross boot, and snapped it like it was like completely like sideways, and just still gives me shivers. And he laid there and howled for what, like an ambulance took like an hour and a half to get there, and he was just howling. So
Ouch.
yeah, and lucky that that's all that happened to him, I guess, right? I mean, a lot worse has happened, right? So
Yeah, anything in the head. That's the thing that you want to, lots of people who have like acquired brain injuries, TBIs, like traumatic brain injuries. It's easy to, it's easy not to think about it when you're just like an adrenaline-filled teenage boy. But if you bang your head, even with a helmet on, there's a reasonable chance that you'll lose the ability to speak or something like that, and you'll spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair and not be able to, not be able to move your arms and things like that. It can really screw your life up, where to the extent that you would wish that you'd snapped your leg in half, because at least that, you still get to remain yourself.
yeah, no, and I know, like as a youth, I mean, and somebody's commenting there, say like, "Thank God for boys." It is kind of like a rites of passage for lots of young men to push the boundaries, right? And I know I did it myself, and there's a lot of things that I would consider myself lucky to be still sitting here.
Definitely, I feel like all men, pretty much all men, will have to have a story like that they can tell. And I've got a load of, I just have like a long list of very stupid things that I've done, including like jumping around like an idiot in places like the Grand Canyon and Canyonlands with like a 2,000-foot drop below me or something like that. Which I look back on, even photographs of me doing that. I look back and just think like, what the hell was I doing there?
Yeah, there's
But
lots of
you know, especially when you include vehicles and
yeah, there's lots
guns and things like that, it's yeah.
there's lots of Instagrammers that have met their fate doing those types of things, like taking this wild photo in different places. But let's move on to markets because we're nearing our close for the day. Gold up again. Look at that chart there. Gold, political instability in the world continues to drive gold, and economic situations. And there's a good article I posted on my LinkedIn from David Rosenberg, talking about the need to have gold as one of your assets to. Even if Canada faces some economic uncertainty, gold could be an asset that preserves, like your Canadian dollar as well, like, some of your assets. Crypto, again, just kind of like bouncing in that range there, right? It looks like it's finishing off that shoulder though, so technically we could see that run now to the next level, which would be, into the $125,000 mark if you're a technical analyst there. Or, and I can't see it going down because some people would say that it looks to fill that gap there between 70,000 and 95,000 too. That there's a gap there that day. That was the election. You can see that in November there. That gap up was the election of Donald Trump. Canadian dollar. It doesn't show a lot of fear in the tariffs. So, the Canadian dollar a lot more confident than a lot of people actually. So there you go. Money talks. Canadian dollar
Seems to have topped out a bit there, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it needs an election. Like I said, if there's an election and we get somebody that is pro-resource sector, this thing bounces hard. If we get more of the same and the same thing that we've been doing for the last 10 years, this thing will plunge lower. And that's just a thought, an opinion. But hey, you look at the charts the way you want to look at the charts. But even David Eby here in British Columbia, the premier, has said that the reason they're not giving that $1,000 grocery credit that they promised everybody is because of the Canadian dollar. Well, he promised it way prior to Donald Trump, and the dollar is actually doing better than that. So I don't know, like using the dollar as an excuse. And then he said it was because of capital outflow into the U.S., and that's been happening for the last 3 years. So both of those excuses are pretty much lame.
Yep.
And then Brookfield, Bart Carney used to be the CEO of used to be the chairman or CEO of or the chairman of Brookfield. They're looking to raise $7 billion in a U.S. infrastructure fund, and they're looking to invest in UK's for $1.7 billion in another renewable business. And people have been calling for Carney to disclose his financial holdings. And again, Brookfield looking to do a lot in the green energy field, and which is, if he drives a green agenda here, there might be, some perceived conflict of interest there.
I think they're being very shrewd there by trying to buy onshore renewables in the United Kingdom, because they're subsidized to an extraordinary extent over there, and energy bills are pretty much the highest in the Western world, which means therefore just about the highest in the world. So you can make a lot of money.
There you go. In the AI world, the weatherman may be a robot. There says many companies, both in the United States and abroad, that are looking for ways to use AI to more reliably predict the weather. And it looks like AI is doing a better job than most weather people. And that's there's a Chinese company, Huawei, is developing an AML called Pangu Weather, which can predict weekly weather patterns around the world more quickly and accurately than traditional forecasting methods. So look for Max Headroom to be doing your weather forecast. Remember Max Headroom?
Yeah, he's Canadian, isn't he, that guy?
I think it was a Canadian movie, wasn't it?
I think that actor is Canadian. Anyway, he's a very odd guy, isn't he? I can't remember his name now, though. Yeah, he is. Matt Frewer. He's Canadian. But yeah, I mean, is it the question I would ask about this robot weathermen? will
Yeah.
it be as funny when they get blown over by the wind and things like that? I'm not sure it will be. It's not as funny to see a robot fall over, is it? As to see a man.
Yeah, well, the robot might know better than to stand in the wind.
Or it might just kind of like drill down into the ground or something.
Yeah. But again, weather patterns, they've been, I think that you can look for AI to be taking over that industry. In our EV world, we're seeing this a lot more. BMW halts the mini EV plan for Cowley in row over tariffs. So the German car maker is stalling demand for electric vehicles behind the move, but others suggest it's being hit by EU tariffs from vehicles it makes in China. So a lot of turmoil in the automotive industry, lots and lots of turmoil. With Donald Trump ending the EV mandates too, so a lot of auto manufacturers now going to lean more into the hybrids and stuff like that too, right? So, but
Yeah, it's a very topsy-turvy world, isn't it? With the
but
Chinese EVs, obviously, as well. That's the other sort of
on,
demon on the horizon.
on the other side of that, global electric vehicle sales up 18% in January, so they are still rising. In a lot of areas, they sell quite well. Again, we talked about it. Norway, I think they're at 100% of, like almost 100% of all new vehicle sales are EVs. China is well over 50% of all new EV sales. UK leading as well in EV sales, even leading Europe right now. So, in Canada, a couple provinces do well in EVs. That's British Columbia and Quebec, but we're still under 20%, I think, nationwide. I think it's in the 10 or 11 mark actually. BC and Quebec are in the 20s, I think.
I think maybe that's because there aren't that many electric trucks yet, are there? And people need trucks in this country in a way that they don't somewhere like England. So
Yeah,
maybe once that's figured out.
if you live outside of a metro area, I mean, the trucks and SUVs are probably the most common vehicles out there. Like, if you live in, a smaller community, a pickup truck is, I've driven pickup trucks for most of my life. There you go, because it's very versatile.
Indeed.
You can pack your snow around in the box all the time, right? You can always have snow with you. There's nobody going to tell you what to do about it either. Get it?
Very subtle pun.
On this show, everything that we do, we always try to leave you to learn something too. We always want to share stuff, and we work really hard at making sure after you watch this that you have knowledge to take away with you, as opposed to we avoid like the typical talking points. So we're kind of like more straight to the point. So there you go. Tesla says that it's going to announce a new Model S and a new Model X refresh later this year. They've been refreshing their lineups. They refreshed the Model 3 recently, and then the Model Y has been refreshed and people have ordered it, so they're just waiting deliveries on the new Model Y. It should be coming shortly. But, like Chrystia Freeland has promised to put 100% tariffs on Teslas, because that's what the Liberals like to do. They like to target people. And it makes no sense. The Canadians would suffer in that regard, because not sure what Elon Musk has done to Canadians other than be a friend of Donald Trump. And I don't think, if we're going to do that, that's going to be a tough world to live in. If every time you have a friend, must have happened to you in high school and that too, right? If you're a friend of that person, you're not a friend of mine.
I think it's also about the team he's on, because in that Charlie Angus thing and that petition, there's a lot of talk about how he's like funding right-wing movements, or giving attention to right-wing movements around the world, like the AfD in Germany. So I think it's like they look at him now as being like fully on that team, and look at themselves as being on the left, and therefore prone to being a victim of his largesse.
Yeah, and I think Misty in our YouTube comments there said that we need to end the EV mandates. And I would agree with her there, because if we don't end those EV mandates and the United States ends their EV mandates, our automobile sector is probably gone. Because Ford and GM, just like Stellantis, will just move south of the border.
Yeah, and that applies to a lot of areas. It's not just the mandates, is it? It's like a lot of like this idea that Mark Carney has of sort of taxing companies that come from countries where they don't have a carbon tax of their own. Things like that. It's gonna Well, from where I'm sitting anyway, that looks like that will harm Canadian industry, but we'll have to wait and see.
And then locally, though, the new Tesla dealership is opening here in Kelowna soon. And there's a picture of it. It's almost done. So if you are keen on driving an EV, there you go. And I think people should choose electric EVs because they're cheaper, better, faster, not because somebody told you to buy one. So if you want to buy one, buy one. And if you don't.
Let's hope nobody goes and puts graffiti on it, like it happened in Germany, didn't it? Where they put some like Nazi symbols on or something.
The Germans love to put graffiti on everything, though. Like they protest, like I think that's a job in Germany, isn't it? Protesting.
Could well be, yeah.
Because their
As long
economy
as it's green, protest.
their economy is actually worse than Canada's, and that's a sorry state to be in, right?
Yeah, in terms of their growth, yeah. I mean, it's all because of the energy situation, isn't it? And all their companies, all these apparently loyal companies, are just going off to the US where they can get energy cheaper.
Yeah. We got a meme here to show you. And there's a lot of talk out there that that there's arranging for a tour of Fort Knox. Another one of those things out there. It's kind of like like the JFK files, MLK files. Nobody seems to be able to tour Fort Knox. And then they say that Babylon Bee put out there and says that they're just going to find an IOU in the middle of the floor. It says, I owe you 5 million gold bars. Yeah, so you and I have been talking about it too. There's a bunch of gold that's been shipped out of the UK recently back to the US, taking it right out of the basement of Buckingham Palace, I take it.
It's from the Bank of England, privately
Yeah.
held. It doesn't actually belong to the British state. I don't think there's very much of that left.
You know what? For me, the interest wouldn't be touring Fort Knox to see if the gold was there. You know where I'd love to tour? Buckingham
The
Palace.
Vatican.
No, the Buckingham Palace basement, to see all the stuff that over the ages, from King Arthur's sword to all the stuff that they pillaged from many countries.
It didn't tend to. It would be the better place to go would be the British Museum, and it wasn't really pillaged. It was acquired or rescued in many cases. But in
Spoils.
terms of pillage, the Vatican would be the one I'd want to see because obviously the Catholic Church benefited from actual pillage, like outright theft in Latin America. So that would be an intriguing one for me.
Well, I know that there was one where I think there was India that asked for some of its crown jewels back, and England said that they could borrow them, but they can't have them.
Well, they weren't stolen. I think you're talking about the Corino. That wasn't stolen. I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. The British Empire was not like the Spanish Empire. I mean, it's far too big of a topic to discuss now. But the Spanish Empire was an extractive empire based on theft and coercion and enslavement and all the rest of it. The British Empire was much more of a merchant's empire. So they tended to buy things rather than steal them.
Yeah, so there you go. We got one more meme to show you, and this one I think most people can relate to. Either one of the partners that put stuff on the staircase, meaning to move it to another room. That's the slow migration. I'm sure with 2 kids, you have some migration stuff that's moving around in your home a lot, right?
Absolutely. Dirty diapers having to migrate into the garbage as well. That's another one.
The staircase, the front door, the staircase, and there seem to be favorites for my household. Is like stuff gets put on the staircase meant to take up or down the next time you go that way, and then you just keep walking by it. And then the front door, when you open the door and just put the cardboard outside, and yeah, you any migration?
Yeah, definitely works like that. Yeah, there's a lot of things. I couldn't even name any specifics. It's just a general rule that applies, I think, in my house.
When we were living in Edmonton, my wife worked at the bank, and I could tell what she ate for the week because she would throw all her garbage on the passenger floor. Like all her Tim Hortons and everything that she ate on her drives back and forth. Because it was about in Edmonton, it was about an hour drive. So you had to, use that time, productively by either eating your breakfast or something. And I remember driving on the 401 in Toronto and watching this is the best one. The girl had a toaster in her car and she was curling her hair and making toast. So she had a converter in there. So that's what she was doing on the 401, making toast and curling her hair.
I mean, she was living in the future by the sounds of things. It's almost like it was a self-driving car.
It was pretty impressive, right? Making toast and curling her hair. Like, again, the 401, you've been on it many times, I'm sure. They got those signs that says, like it's 25 minutes for the next kilometer, right? So have patience as you're traveling in this ribbon of red.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. It's far worse now than it's ever been because this huge injection of people that we've experienced in Canada over the last few years, I think actually more than 50%, so a majority went straight there to the GTA. So it's like it was already impossible to get around there like 10 years ago, but now it's just like a whole new level of misery.
Yeah, it would be really, really tough to have to travel that 401. And especially, the 401 is huge. And I don't know what's that highway called that runs next to the 401? Like, I don't know, I've been in Toronto for a while, but I worked out of there for about, close to 2 years. And it was just, every time I had to go to the airport, it was just like, oh my God. The flight home to Kelowna was almost as long or short as the drive to the airport sometimes.
Yeah, it's I mean, there are a few cities. I mean, Los Angeles is the other one that's extremely famous or infamous for that. And it's really dreadful, isn't it? But I actually think like getting out of Vancouver as well, kind of like going east up to like towards Abbotsford and that can be really like horrible and miserable as well. Like it just seems like the infrastructure, this is another topic altogether, but the infrastructure is just so far behind in certain parts of Canada, isn't it?
Well, that's our really big show for today. We hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, we appreciate the comments, we appreciate the viewership, and we hope to impart some knowledge each time too that you can actually take with you and learn. And we hope to engage you in the conversations. So we ask that you follow, like, and subscribe on our YouTube channel and on our X channel and on our TikTok channel. And KelownaNow.com, go there, visit. We have a newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter that goes out 365 days a year, 7 days a week, and before 7 a.m. And I was going to say something. I just lost what I was going to say. I don't know what I was going to say. But we'll be back tomorrow with more. And again, we appreciate it. And we appreciate you. Thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent.